This is London, a city of wealth and power. It is home to more than 200,000 millionaires, hundreds of centimillionaires, and dozens of billionaires. London is very rich, but the rest of the United Kingdom, not so much. Across the country, people now have less disposable income than the poorest 5 US states, and even less than the average in most developed countries. And if you remove London and the southeast from the equation, the UK's GDP per person falls by about 14%. In some towns, life expectancy is lower than in Rwanda. Many once thriving industrial cities now rank among the poorest in Western Europe. The Grand Kingdom that once ruled the world has fallen into deep division and decline. How did it happen? This is the story of the United Kingdom, the divided kingdom. Our story starts in 1979. Margaret Thatcher becomes Prime Minister with the one clear goal: to stop inflation. During the 1970s, prices were out of control. What cost €100 in 1970 was worth more than 300 by 1979. Two major oil shocks had rocked the world. When OPC raised oil prices again and again, everything from petrol to groceries became more expensive overnight. At the same time, strong trade union demanded higher wages to match the rising prices. This created a dangerous cycle. Prices went up, wages went up, then prices went up again. On top of that, the government's loose money policy. There was far too much cash moving around the economy. It was a recipe for disaster. Thatcher, along with his Chancellor Geoffrey Howe and advisor Cat Joseph and Alan Walters, decided to make inflation the number one enemy. Their plan was tough and simple. Step number 1. Cut the money supply. The government tried to squeeze the amount of money in circulation. They reduced the growth of the money supply from about 12% a year to just 6% by 1984. Step number 2. Rise interest rates. In June 1979, interest rates rose from 12 to 14%. By November, they reached 17%, the highest in British history. Borrowing money became painfully expensive. The goal was to stop people from borrowing and spending too much, slowing the economy enough to crush inflation. But this had side effects. The stronger pound made British exports more costly overseas, while high borrowing costs hurt local businesses. Factories couldn't invest or expand. Many couldn't even stay open. Step number 3. Cut government spending. Thatcher also wanted to reduce how much the government borrowed. She aimed to cut public borrowing from 4.7% of GDP to only 1.5% by 1983. At the same time, in the middle of recession, taxes were raised. The result: more than 2 million people lost their jobs, and every month another 100,000 joined the unemployment line. The pain was so great that hundreds of economists wrote an open letter saying her policy had no base in real economic theory. But did it work? In one way, yes. Inflation fell from 13% in 1979 to 5% by 1983. However, the prices was high. The cost of recovery. The high interest rates, the strong pound, and the cuts in spending crushed Britain manufacturing towns. The country's industrial heart was gutted, and inequality between regions started to grow. But London, how it lived a very different story, because it relied more on financial and services industries than on factories. London survived the storm much better. By the mid-1980s, unemployment in northern England, Scotland, and Wales rose above 15%, while in London and the southeast and stayed below 10%. But why? Because of one bold move: the Big Bang, London's financial revolution. Thatcher wanted to turn London into a global financial superpower. Her Big Bang reforms removed old rules and welcomed the world banks to the city. Fixed commission were scrapped, exchange controls ended, foreign ownership was allowed, and electronic trading was introduced. Money poured in. Foreign banks invested about $450 million into London. 1,500 new millionaires were created. and the city quickly became one of the world's most powerful financial centers. On paper, the UK looked like it had been reborn. The economy grew. GDP per person rose from about 15,000 to nearly 20,000 by 1990. But numbers don't show the full picture. During the same time, the Gini coefficient, a measure of inequality, jumped from 25 to 35. That means while average wealth rose 30%, inequality rose 40%. Britain was richer, yes, but only some people were feeling it. The decline of manufacturing. One big reason inequality grew so fast was the fall of Britain factories. In 1979, manufacturing made up almost 30% in the UK's economy. By 1990, it had dropped to just 16%. Millions of good-paying industrial jobs disappeared, down by almost 40% between 1979 and 1993. Yes, GDP and national income increased, but if you didn't live in London, it didn't feel that way. The service industries grew, but other parts of the economy, like mining, steel, and shipbuilding, collapsed. Whole towns that once relied on these industries were left behind. Jobs and the hidden numbers. There's another way to see the damage. When a factory opens, it doesn't just hire its own workers. It also supports their jobs. The people who supply materials, transport goods, sell products, or provide services nearby. For example, a factory that raises 100 workers directly might create 300 more jobs indirectly. That's a ratio of 1 direct job to 3 indirect ones. But the banking industry is different. For every 100 banking jobs, only about 200 more are supported, a ratio of 1 to 2. And in iron manufacturing, the ratio is 1 to 9, meaning one factory worker supports 9 other jobs. So where Britain shifted from making things to providing financial services, the total number of jobs supported across economy fell sharply. That's why service-based economies often created higher GDP but also more inequality. Wealth gets concentrated and favor hand. The human cost. It wasn't just about jobs. It was about what kind of jobs people had. Factory workers used to have secure contracts, retirement plans, paid holidays, and benefits like insurance and sick leave. When those jobs vanished, people moved into low-paid, less secure work without these protections. So even tough, the country was technically richer. Millions of ordinary families felt poor. And because manufacturing had always been spread across northern and central Britain, its collapse made those regions much weaker than London and the South. Today, not a simple region north of London has a GDP per person higher than the UK average. That means everywhere outside London and the Southeast is below average in wealth and productivity. Let that sink in. A country that once built ships, cars, and machines for the world now depend on a single city for most of its income, migration, and the pull of London. Normally, when parts of country become poor, people move to richer cities. Economies through this world happen in Britain too. That workers would move from struggling areas to London. But something strange happened, the opposite. More people left London and moved to it. Even tough average incomes in London are about 14% higher than the rest of the country. When you include rent and living cost, that advantage almost disappears. After paying for housing, Londoners earn only about 1% more than the UK average. So unless you are in the top income group, moving to London doesn't make financial sense. Housing prices there are almost twice as high as the national average, and the space you get for your money is much smaller. No wonder London now faces one of the worst homeless crises in the developed world, the housing crisis. In 2024, more than 13,000 people were recorded sleeping on London streets, a 63% increase compared to the 10 years ago. 2% of Londoners are now considered homeless. To compare, New York rate is 0.8%. Toronto is 0.5%, Paris is 0.3%, and Amsterdam just 0.2%. London stands alone. One of the biggest causes goes back in 1980s. Thatcher's right to buy policy. It allowed people living in government-owned homes to buy them at large discounts, up to 17% of the market price. At first, it seems like a great idea, turning renters into proud homeowners. But the government didn't replace the home it sold, and many buyers sold their properties later at full price, making huge profits. All time, London almost more than half of its social housing, dropping from 7,15,000 homes in 1980 to around 3,90,000 today. What was once 30% of the city's housing stock and now only about 10%. Worse still, around 40% of those right to buy homes are now rented out privately at market prices, the exact opposite of what the policy was meant to achieve: foreign investment and the new economy. As London's housing prices rose, something else started happening: a flood of foreign investment. Wealthy buyers from around the world began purchasing property across central London, not to live in, but to hold as assets. Luxury apartments, once homes for local families, become empty symbols for global wealth. In districts like Kensington and Westminster, it's common to find entire streets where half the homes are unoccupied most of the year. Meanwhile, for ordinary Londoners, even renting became nearly impossible. The dream of home ownership faded, and for many young people, it disappeared completely. Government spending and unequal growth. Let's look at how the UK government spends its money. London, with just 15% of the UK population, receives nearly 30% of total public investment. That means more transport projects, better infrastructure, and faster services, while the rest of the country waits decades for similar development. It means investing not only in railways and roads, but in people, their education, their housing, and their communities. The UK once built ships, cars, and machines for the world. It can build again, but this time it needs to build fairness. Britain's story is far from over. Its future depends on whether it can rise together. Thank you for watching. If you are interested to watch more videos like this, subscribe The Hidden Sphere.